My jealous fiancée got me fired because she didn't want me earning more than her. So, I left her and landed an even better job. I'm 32 male. I met my fiancée at a friend's graduation party a couple of years ago. She struck me as ambitious, driven, and sharp-witted. Exactly the qualities I thought I wanted in a partner. We started dating, and for a while, everything seemed perfect. We both had stable jobs, we enjoyed each other's company, and we discussed long-term plans. I proposed after about 18 months, thrilled at the thought of building a future together. However, my fiancée had some quirks that started surfacing once wedding planning entered the picture. She would casually drop hints that she didn't like the idea of a man out-earning her because it made her feel inferior, but I brushed it off initially. I assumed it was just a personal preference she had, and I respected that. Little did I know she was harboring a deep jealousy that would become toxic. At the time, I was working for a tech company in the city, handling a mix of software testing and client support. My salary was modest but decent, and there was plenty of room for growth. My fiancée worked in marketing at a rival firm, making slightly less than I did, but still enough to live comfortably. I didn't see it as a competition. I just saw it as two people trying to build careers. One day, I came home excited, announcing that I'd been given a raise and a new project lead role. Instead of congratulating me, she frowned. She said, "That's nice. But doesn't it bother you that we're drifting in different directions?" Caught off guard, I reassured her that I'd help her any way I could if she wanted to level up her career. I asked if she was upset about something else. Maybe the stress of wedding planning? She insisted it was nothing, so I shrugged it off and moved on. Over the next few weeks, she grew distant. Whenever I was late from work, she'd make snarky comments like, "Oh, so your new salary is making you too big for your own fiancé? Or don't forget I'm the one who keeps you grounded." These jabs were subtle, but left me unsettled. Sometimes I tried to laugh them off. Other times, I confronted her, only to be met with her insisting I was imagining things. Then I noticed something strange in my office. One of my coworkers approached me and said, "Hey, I got an odd call asking about your performance reviews." Some lady was claiming to be from HR, but the questions were pretty weird, like how much you earned, whether you had conflicts with coworkers. My stomach churned. Our HR department was small, and the coworker definitely would have recognized the voice if it were legitimate. I immediately suspected my fiancée, but I couldn't prove it. I decided to be direct. That evening, I asked, "Did you call my workplace pretending to be HR?" Because they said someone's been fishing for information. She looked offended. "Seriously? You think I'd do that? Am I that kind of person?" Her act was so convincing, I almost doubted my own intuition. But the next day, our actual HR manager pulled me aside and said, "We got a complaint about you from an anonymous source, claiming you've been violating some confidentiality rules." I knew instantly who was behind it. Even so, I went through the investigation calmly, knowing I'd done nothing wrong. While they were still processing the complaint, I confronted my fiancée again, more directly. "I know it was you. Why would you do this?" She stared at me coldly, refusing to confess. Eventually, she stormed off to stay at her friend's place for the night, texting me once with a cryptic message. "You brought this on yourself." Things escalated quickly. The next day, upper management placed me on administrative leave pending further investigation. Suddenly, the raise I'd been so proud of was overshadowed by a looming threat of job loss. Feeling cornered, I called my father for advice. He told me to be patient, gather all the evidence I could, and speak with a lawyer if necessary. The lawyer confirmed that if I could prove my fiancée was behind the complaint, I might have grounds for a defamation case. But no matter what, I needed to stay calm and let the corporate investigation wrap up. However, corporate investigations don't always go in your favor, even if you're innocent. My fiancée had evidently left enough vague but damaging hints that I might be sharing proprietary data outside the company, and the management was spooked. Despite my clean record, they wanted to play it safe. After a tense week, my boss called me in. She wore a sympathetic expression but spoke with finality. "We've decided to terminate your employment. It's not an admission of wrongdoing on your part, but we can't risk potential legal issues." "I'm sorry." Just like that, I lost my job. I walked out of that office numb, grappling with the realization that my own fiancée had likely orchestrated this. I sat in my car for an hour, thinking about how I'd confront her. Would she lie again? Would she at least apologize? Did she even care that she destroyed my livelihood for some twisted sense of competition? I got home to find her looking almost relieved, as though my termination was a victory for her. She kept deflecting, saying things like, "Now you can look for a more balanced job, one that doesn't overshadow my career." Her sense of entitlement was infuriating. I told her point blank, "I'm done. If this is your idea of love, I want no part of it." But she wasn't prepared to let go so easily, or at least not without more drama. And that's when I realized she had more tricks up her sleeve. The next morning, I contacted an attorney to see if I had any legal recourse. The attorney explained that wrongful termination suits can be tricky, especially if the employer claims they acted in good faith based on complaints received. The defamation angle against my fiancée might also be hard to prove unless I had solid evidence connecting her to the anonymous tips. However, the attorney suggested that if I found any direct link, like messages, emails, or phone logs, I could build a decent case. I decided to do some digging. My father offered to help by looking through my phone records, which I could request from my service provider. Meanwhile, I combed through my fiancée's old text messages on our shared computer. We had a habit of syncing our devices so we could see each other's calendars, to-do lists, and sometimes message notifications. I wasn't proud of snooping, but at this point, I felt justified. Finally, I hit pay dirt. Buried in her sent folder was an email to my old company's general info account, a lengthy message filled with vague accusations, hinting that I was sharing proprietary details with external contacts, complete with a fake signature that read, "Concerned team member." I recognized her writing style, certain phrases she used all the time in everyday speech. My heart pounded as I read. It was one of the most blatant acts of sabotage I'd ever seen. I printed it out, showed it to my mother, who shook her head and said, "I can't believe someone who claims to love you could do something so..." When I confronted my fiancée with the printed email, her eyes darted around like she was caught in a trap. She tried to argue that it wasn't technically a lie because I had pitched some ideas to a friend who worked at another tech firm, but that was just brainstorming we did over casual beers. It wasn't confidential data. She twisted it, calling it unprofessional, as though that justified her actions. She then became defensive, accusing me of violating her privacy by digging through her emails. I retorted, "This is the computer we agreed to share for wedding planning. And this is proof you cost me my job." She rolled her eyes and said, "Don't be dramatic. You'll find another job." That was the final straw. I realized this was not just about a lost job. It was about who she was at her core, manipulative, entitled, and controlling. I told her to gather her belongings and leave my apartment. I still had the lease in my name. She exploded, throwing baseless threats my way. She claimed she would sue me for emotional distress, or that I'd wasted her time on a wedding that wasn't going anywhere. I almost laughed at the absurdity, but I held it together. I decided to file a police report for harassment, just in case she tried to escalate her threats. The officer at the station was patient, but he also made it clear that unless she posed an imminent threat, there wasn't much they could do beyond logging my complaint. At least it was on record if she tried something else. Meanwhile, my parents urged me to come stay with them for a while. At first, I resisted. I was a grown man in my early 30s, and moving back felt like a step backward. But they convinced me it was for the best, especially after my fiancée refused to leave and started making my life a nightmare in that apartment. My father said, "Son, it's not weakness to remove yourself from a toxic environment. Regroup. Figure out your next steps. You're always welcome here." So, I packed a few essentials and left. I reached out to the landlord the following day, explaining the situation and asking to terminate the lease early. The landlord, surprisingly compassionate, said if I could find a sublet or cover a fee, he'd release me from the contract. So I arranged it quickly to ensure I could cut ties with that apartment. And with her, as all this was happening, I was still dealing with the aftermath of losing my job. With some free time on my hands, I updated my resume, reached out to industry contacts, and tried to keep my spirits up. I also spoke with a couple of hiring managers who knew me personally, explaining the circumstances of my abrupt departure. Luckily, I had a good reputation in my field. People knew my work ethic. I still worried that word might spread about some bogus confidentiality breach if my old company decided to mention it. About 2 weeks after I left the apartment, a friend tipped me off to an opening at an up-and-coming tech startup. They were expanding fast and looking for a project manager with client-facing experience. It sounded perfect. The pay range listed was even higher than my previous role, which was an ironic twist of fate given my fiancée's jealousy. I went through 3 rounds of interviews. The final interview took place on a Friday afternoon. I felt prepared, but a bit nervous. The CEO asked me point-blank about my abrupt exit from my last job. I told the truth without going into the personal drama. There was a complaint, which I believe was baseless, leading to my termination. I've sought legal advice, and I'm confident my record speaks for itself. I'm ready to move forward. The CEO nodded and said, "We appreciate honesty. We're a small team here, so trust matters a lot." On Sunday evening, while I was sitting in my parents' living room, I got a call from the startup's HR manager. "We'd love to have you on board. Can you start next week?" The relief I felt was overwhelming. I thanked them repeatedly, feeling a surge of triumph at the idea of moving on. But the drama with my fiancée wasn't over yet. She discovered I'd landed a new job, probably through mutual friends or social media, and decided to poke at me one last time. She tried to contact the startup's HR manager anonymously, sending an email with baseless allegations again. Luckily, I had warned them in advance about the potential for false complaints. The HR manager immediately forwarded the email to me and said, "Is this the same situation you mentioned?" I confirmed it was, and she replied, "We won't give this any credibility." Glad we got the heads up. That was the moment I realized I wasn't powerless. Her attempts to sabotage me would fail as long as I stayed one step ahead. I still felt anger at her betrayal, but it was tempered by a growing resolve. If she wanted to fight, I was ready to defend myself. And this time, with a supportive new employer and my family by my side, I was determined not to let her get the upper hand. My first week at the new startup was exhilarating. The team was small, energetic, and open to new ideas. I felt appreciated right from day one. I think they sensed how eager I was to prove myself after my last job ended so badly. The CEO took me out to lunch, asking about my vision for the role, and I laid out a strategy to streamline client communications and tighten our software testing protocols, both tasks I'd excelled at in my old job. She was genuinely impressed. Meanwhile, I was in the process of finalizing my legal approach to my ex-fiancée's sabotage. Although my lawyer admitted it might be tough to get a conviction for defamation, she did say we could send a cease and desist letter. We drafted a letter warning her to stop contacting my new employer or spreading false claims about my professional conduct, or we'd pursue legal remedies. On a Wednesday evening, I left the office feeling pretty good about the direction of my life. Then my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Against my better judgment, I answered. It was her. She wasted no time launching into accusations, calling me a backstabber for leaving her. She even said, "You think you can just walk away? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Her voice was laced with anger and bitterness. I calmly responded, "Whatever threats you're making, stop. I've spoken to a lawyer. I've got a job now, and I'm not letting you ruin this for me." She snapped, "I don't care about your new job. I just want you to know I'm not finished." Then she hung up. Later that night, I found an online review about me, posted on a small industry forum, claiming I had stolen proprietary code and sold it to competitors. It was obviously fake. The writing style, though disguised, had certain phrases that gave her away. My lawyer advised me to keep a record of everything. So I took screenshots, made sure to note the time, and even had a colleague vouch that the post was new. 3 days later, I discovered from a mutual acquaintance that she was telling people we'd broken up because I was a shady guy who cheated on her, painting me as the villain. My father, upon hearing this, shook his head and said, "No sense responding to rumors. People and those who believe it aren't worth your time." Still, I couldn't help feeling a surge of fury. I'd never cheated on her. If anything, I was the one who'd been taken for a ride. I decided enough was enough. My lawyer and I sent her the cease and desist letter, making it crystal clear that if she continued to harass me or slander my name, we'd file a lawsuit. We also requested that she provide proof of any alleged wrongdoing on my part or publicly retract her statements. It was a long shot, but it felt good to take that formal step. For a while, the harassment stopped, probably because she realized we were serious. I focused on settling into my new job, forging friendships with my colleagues, and finally feeling a sense of peace. My parents noticed the change in me, how much more relaxed I was. My mother even remarked, "I haven't seen you this happy since before the engagement." Maybe this was a blessing in disguise. Then something unexpected happened. I found out through that same mutual acquaintance that my ex had lost her job. Apparently, her own workplace discovered she'd been using company resources to send those anonymous emails and make those bogus calls about me. She'd left a digital trail that even a novice IT person could trace. On top of that, she tried to blame someone else in her office, which only made her look guiltier. According to what I heard, they fired her on the spot. A week after that news, I received a text from her, this time apologizing and sounding pitiful. She claimed she was just insecure and had acted out of desperation. She begged for forgiveness, even said we could still get married if we worked through our issues. I almost laughed out loud. The nerve of someone who sabotaged my career, tried to ruin my reputation, and then cried for pity when her own plan backfired. My father advised me to ignore her messages. My lawyer said not to engage except to remind her that any further attempts at contact would be considered harassment. So I simply typed back, "Do not contact me again. My lawyer will be informed of this text." And that was that. In the meantime, my new job was turning into a dream gig. The startup's leadership put a lot of faith in me, and I was thriving. The CEO even hinted at the possibility of stock options if our product took off. I thought about how ironic it was that my ex-fiancée's jealousy cost me my old job, yet somehow steered me toward an even better opportunity. Her sabotage was like an unintentional favor in the long run. But that didn't erase the anger I still felt at how malicious she'd been. I decided I needed closure, a final act that would let me move on. My attorney recommended we send a final letter of settlement, stating that as long as she stopped all defamatory statements, we'd refrain from pursuing further legal action. We drafted it, gave her a deadline, and waited. She never responded. Her silence said everything. It was over. With the drama winding down, I finally felt free to focus on my future. I poured my energy into the startup, and in a short span of months, our team managed to launch a new platform that attracted attention from a larger tech company. Soon, we were in talks for a potential acquisition deal, which meant I could see real financial gain if the negotiations went smoothly. During this time, I heard from another friend that my ex-fiancée had left town, likely in search of a fresh start somewhere else. I'd be lying if I said I didn't feel a grim sense of satisfaction knowing that her acts of sabotage ended up costing her dearly. She'd lost her job, her credibility, and even her circle of friends distanced themselves once they learned what she'd done to me. Her final phone call to me was a silent one, just heavy breathing on the other end before hanging up. I assumed it was her way of making contact without having to actually speak, but I felt no pity. A few weeks later, my boss at the startup sat me down and said, "We're finalizing the acquisition. The buyer wants you to stay on as the lead for a new department. It'll come with a substantial pay increase." I almost couldn't believe it. Just a short time ago, I was unemployed, kicked out of my own apartment, stressed out of my mind. Now, I was not only employed, but on the verge of a significant career leap. My father, who had seen the whole roller coaster unfold, gave me a congratulatory handshake and said, "It's good to see you come out on top. You put in the work and stood your ground. That's all any of us can do." He asked if I had any regrets about letting the relationship go. I told him, not a single one. In retrospect, my ex-fiancée's jealousy took me to rock bottom, but it also forced me to reevaluate my life. I had to rediscover my sense of self-worth, rely on my family, and push forward with my career. That turning point opened doors I never would have pursued otherwise. Despite all the chaos she caused, I emerged from the situation stronger and more determined than ever. I suppose the takeaway is that sometimes people reveal their true colors at the worst possible moments, but that can also free us from an even worse fate down the road. My ex's actions were despicable, and she faced the consequences of her entitlement. As for me, I ended up in a better place than I'd ever imagined, personally and professionally.